Are you a corporate escapee and wasting valuable time attempting to figure challenges out on your own? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you firsthand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day.
We get real with no corporate BS. And now, over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello and welcome to Corporate Escapees, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of people who are successfully running their own businesses, hearing their war stories and motivations for making the jump from their corporate gig. I'm your host, Paul Higgins, and our guest today is someone who had a very successful career in finance, but was suffering incredibly from anxiety and stress. They left and migrated to California, worked for 12 months in venture, but realized that they just had to leave and start their own gig. Now they are a very successful business and life coach and ultimately have freedom. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Jessica Silverman from Mo Zen Wellness. Welcome, Jessica Silverman from Mo Zen Wellness to the Corporate Escapees podcast brought to you by Build, Live, Give. So, Jessica, we're going to get to know lots about you today, but why don't we start with something your friends or family would know about you that we wouldn't?
Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for having me in your sacred space. And of course, thank you, listeners, for being with me today. So what is something that friends or family know about me that others wouldn't? I would say my quirkiness. So I tend to portray myself on social media as being very serious. And of course, that is a huge part of me and who I am and my story. I'm very studious. I was a very good student kind of growing up and kind of a book nerd and a bit more introverted. But I do have a very quirky nature about me. And that's something I know my husband knows with conviction. And of course, my family as well. My mother calls me a clown, of course, in a good way. She loves clowns. But I think that's something not a lot of people know about me is I have a very flamboyant side, very silly, very kind of out of the box. And I think that's what makes me truly unique in that sense.
Great. So what's an example?
What's an example? You got to kind of hang out in my house to really see it in action. And it's funny because a lot of times, if you would see that in action, you would think, I'm under the influence, of alcohol or something like that to make me that. But that's just sort of in my nature. It's really inbred within me. Something else that my friends and family know that a lot of others don't know about me, and this probably is all connected, is that I was a child actress. So that could probably be a lot of it, is that I love to play different roles and kind of embody different sort of personalities. And so I think a lot of that is embedded within me while also being true to my soul. So I think that that's very unique and something that I treasure very much about myself.
Brilliant. And tell us about your corporate escapee story.
So there are many layers to my corporate escapee story, but I'll start with kind of that defining moment. So my husband and I I live currently in the San Francisco Bay Area here in Silicon Valley. We moved out here 4 years ago, really based on a nudge, just a feeling within me that my life wasn't serving me anymore in Chicago. And I should rewind and say I've been in corporate finance for 15 years, very good at what I do, slowly moving up the corporate ladder from an associate position all the way to management level and then to a VP level. But I had really great anxiety every single day, anxiety, depression. I was 80 pounds overweight. My health was starting to take a downturn, really a whole physical and emotional breakdown. And I just decided I couldn't do this anymore. And I remember my husband turning to me. We lived at the time together in Chicago. He was my boyfriend. We were still dating. And he said, I just want to see you happy. This kills me that I know who you really are. And this is like eating you alive. This position, this corporate culture, it's just not you. And I think I spent so many years really trying to figure out who I was, and that was sort of my calling to move to the San Francisco area. I used to travel here. I was an auditor for a stint in my corporate finance path, and it brought me to San Francisco for 2 weeks out of the year. And that sort of entrepreneurial spirit, the whole free spirit, the whole bohemian vibe out here in San Francisco really captured my spirit. And so I didn't start right away. When we moved out here, I took the safe, path and got a job in venture capital. So funding other startups and other people's dreams, and of course, working on the funding and finance side of that. And after a year, I was at that same point. And it was actually, I get goosebumps because it was around this time. It was the week between Christmas and New Year's. We had that week off. And that day before going back, that January 2nd, I had an emotional breakdown. I couldn't, I told myself, I can't go back. I can't go back. And I almost feel that as I'm explaining it to you. I feel that rise within me, just that panic attack. And I said, I'm quitting. That's it. I've been, funny enough, been listening to podcasts in my 3-hour commute a day on the way to work, hearing all these stories of other people just stepping away from this life that didn't serve them, whether it was a career, whether it was a relationship, habits, toxic habits, and starting life anew and rebirthing and kind of reinventing themselves. And I thought to myself, and it's something I actually heard on a podcast, I'm not sure who said it, but it really, really stuck within me. You have two options. You can stay with what you know and continue on that path, or you can dive into this complete unknown. And worst case scenario, if all doesn't work out, you can always go back to what you're doing, right? Finance is a very stable position. It's always in demand. That's kind of why I picked it. But it was almost too logical for my soul and really who I am at my core. And so I did. I stepped away. I gave my 2 weeks notice with enough money to live for 3 months. It was my Christmas bonus, and it was about enough rent. California is very expensive for those listeners that don't know the California market. It's very hard to make it out here unless you're making 6 figures. And so it was a really big risk. But kind of taking my finance background, right? The greatest risk yields the greatest reward. And so I just decided, hey, I'm gonna throw it all in, gonna invest everything that I have. We're actually planning our wedding at the same time. So actually a lot of my wedding gifts, sorry for those of you that thought it was for kitchen appliances, it all went into my business. I just went 100% in. And here I am, thankfully, 4 years later, living a dream, continuing to evolve and grow with my business while evolving and growing myself in the process.
Oh, look, that's a great story. And, on reflection now, was it easier or harder than you thought it was going to be to run your own business?
Definitely. You know what? That's a two-sided question. The more I think about it, and that's why I hesitated to answer you, because my initial instinct was harder, because that's what everybody thinks. But it's all the way you look at it, right? Life is all perspective. So yes, it's harder because day to day, I am the creator, right? I am the one who creates my schedule. I am the one who decides every one of my choices. Nobody's doing that for me. Or what am I going to focus on? Or what program or what client, right? I mean, all these things change in any given day. So that can be difficult. Of course, the financial piece, right? Money is not consistent. However, I've, figured out a way to make that more consistent, to make it work for me, because freedom was what it was all about. I actually have a sign here in my office that says in big block letters, freedom. That is the spirit of my life and my work and everything. If you think about money and finances and why is that important to you? When I was asked that question years ago, of course, money is important to live, but why? And for me, money was always freedom. So to me, having that freedom, that's the easy part, right? So you say, was it harder? Was it easier? Right? I don't think I envisioned the freedom, right? And the freedom can be hard, though, in the same sense, right? As I just said. So I think it's all beautiful, though, how it works out, because it really teaches you more about yourself than you'll know doing anything else, right? Having your own business really unearths so many layers of your soul that you just never knew or understood. And every day is just a different unraveling, like kind of peeling the onion back and just seeing what lies underneath that next layer. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, look, I hear so many people say, in some respects, it's the first time I really feel alive. It's the authentic me. It's the real me. It's not this, look in the mirror, go to corporate, behave. And certainly for me, I know I behaved differently in a corporate context than what I did at home. And now to be just, the one person, it's liberating. And as far as help, what sort of help did you get through the journey?
So I started off in a coach training school program. Right when I quit my corporate path, I actually signed up while I was still there. So it was a 4-month program, really teaching you not so much how to set up your business, but just how to be a coach, right? I'd never really been a coach. And a lot of people think coaching is just giving advice, right? Or telling people exactly what to do. And what I really learned from that program that I thought was so valuable is that a master coach doesn't really tell people what to do. They show them the way and they show them the path, and you let people find their own answers, right? And to do it in their own fashion and in their own style. So that's the help that I got sort of the first 4 months off the ground. And then I was sort of at this crossroads of what now? I graduated this program. I felt like I knew the spirit of what it took to be a leader, right, in my platform. I started off in completely wellness, holistic wellness coaching. And I felt really confident in what I had to offer, but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know where was that first step, right? Like you said, that's the hard part of entrepreneurship. Most days is where to begin. Do I focus on a website? Do I focus on social media? If so, what platforms and how do I market myself? Do I blog? Do I do videos? Do I do podcasts? And kind of piecing that all together and learning what works well for you and how to use your time wisely. I think that was my biggest struggle starting out. And so since then, I kind of evolved my own routine sort of on my own and sort of through an experimentary phase, so to speak, because I felt like, having the support was wonderful and having a coach was wonderful. But sometimes when you become too dependent on that, you lose your own voice, right? You don't necessarily take the steps that you feel in your heart is right for you. You listen to other people's advice, and then it's, your mission and your business is just a footprint of that. So, but that's not to say that I don't have mentors, still along the path. I still continuously invest in different platforms, sort of learning the best way to utilize that in terms of sharing my story and really just how to make a great impact in the world is really my focus, as is every entrepreneur.
Great. Well, the next section is the build section. And when someone meets you, might be a party or a work environment, and asks you, Jessica, what do you do? How do you answer that?
I am a business and life coach. So I keep it simple. I started with the whole holistic wellness. Then you get the question of, well, what's holistic wellness, right? So I keep it simple. I'm a life and business coach, helping women entrepreneurs learn how to birth their passions and their visions online, how to make a footprint, how to get out there, how to set up their social media, how to share their story, how to be vulnerable, really just how to get out there and piece together, right, all these questions that you have about starting a business, where to begin, and all the, as I like to say, in 3 components. So the physical, that's the logical piece, right? That's the funnel, that's the setup, that's the launch, that's the marketing, right? All of those pieces are logical. The emotional aspects of entrepreneurship. And then, of course, the spiritual, which is, I think, what influences me most and what keeps me going in my business, because without faith, right, without the faith to continue, this is an unknown journey that can be a difficult path. So really just helping women connect the dots, as to what has happened in their life to where they are today and how that tells the story of what they're here to do and be in the world.
Yeah, and what is something that you've learned, especially through the business and life coaching, that you think a lot of people, not miss, but don't often see as clear as you do?
2 things come to mind. So something that I think is my zone of genius, and I sort of alluded to it before, is connecting the dots, right? So I have a gift of really, like I said, piecing together all of the experiences, right, that either a client has had or I've had in my life, and to have a deeper understanding looking backwards. I forget the Steve Jobs quote, and it so beautifully kind of depicts this, sort of like you get to a point in your life and you can connect the dots looking backwards, but you can't see it in that moment and you can't see it looking forward. Mm-hmm. You can only kind of look back and then sort of reconnect. But something that I can do in the present moment is to sort of take, right, all of these things that we see in silo and we don't think are connected, and sort of just connect the dots, right? We like to compartmentalize our lives. And I think that is something that a lot of people don't see, right? Because they're so one track, or they get overwhelmed because, like you said, there's so many different energies, right, involved in starting a business or just in living your life, right? Different obligations, different things going on. And so something that I really think is my zone of genius is how to connect all that, right? Everything, as Einstein said, everything is energy, right? It's science, it's proven, right? And that's all there is to it. And I think that is really a gift, is to understand how that energy comes together, right? How the energy, right, transforms from one realm to the next, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, or whether it's spiritual, and how everything in life that happens to you is guiding you, right, either towards or away from the direction where you want to go. And that's the choices. Not to say there's any right or wrong, right? Even the challenges that transpire in our life, it's just a reminder. It's just a reminder. It's just a calling to follow maybe a different path, maybe to take a step to the left instead of a step to the right. So that's one thing I think that is my zone of genius. And the second thing I would say, that maybe some people don't know, is how to share your story, how to write, how to speak from the heart in a way that not only necessarily is relatable, but is real. I think a lot of people in their writing or when they get on social media, it's they feel like they have to put on an act, and something that I help a lot of my clients, and I have a group course as well that we work through this, is how to create, engaging and empowering content, but how to be vulnerable. And I think a lot of people have a hard time with that. Really opening up, really sharing their story, or just kind of speaking from the heart. And I remember one of my clients said when we first started working, and it was quite a compliment, she said, I've never met you, but it's like I read what you write to me and I can feel your presence in the room. And I think that is a real gift that I took for granted when I started. And now I've really started to hone that in and really embrace that gift and share that wisdom with others.
And you spoke about women entrepreneurs online. How did you come to deciding that they're your ideal client?
My ideal client is me. And that's just what I felt most called to help. I always envisioned, helping the me of the past, right? And I'm just a few steps ahead, and I'm sort of guiding her on this journey. And it's funny because you and I, Paul, spoke at the beginning of the podcast, and you said, do you have any questions? And I said, yeah, is your audience somebody in a corporate position right now, kind of dying to get out like I was? Or is she or he a person that's in their path now and doesn't understand what the next step is? Or maybe they're, half in and half out type of thing. And you said all of the above. And really that was me, right? And so I just try to think about, as I said before, and sharing your story and being vulnerable and being real and being relatable, who can I understand more is a woman, right? That is very much like me. It doesn't mean she's the same age or has the same background, right? But at our foundation, it's all about the feels, right? So a woman that in her heart sort of speaks the same soul language as I do.
Mm-hmm. And how do you sort of find these people, or how do you find your ideal clients?
I primarily find them all on Facebook, actually, Facebook and Instagram, a bit on LinkedIn, but all on social media. It's funny because when I first started, my coach recommended, she says, well, you live in San Francisco. I mean, that's a hot market, to get into, the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, and to lead, lunch and learns and kind of get into that corporate environment and help people find their own path. But that really just didn't feel right to me. I really felt a calling to help individuals, women specifically, as I said before, that are on, right, that were me of the past. And that's really where I sort of felt this deeper calling.
Mm-hmm. And what have you learned, certainly from a Facebook perspective? What are the things that have worked really well for you in the last 6 to 12 months?
Definitely to set I don't want to say set, that's probably not the right word, but to establish, to create, to birth a community, right? To have a community within that is all yours, because Facebook is a very noisy place, right? And as I said before, a lot of people are out there, I don't want to say for the wrong reasons, but to me, it just doesn't come across as very genuine. And when you have your own space, that's yours, that's your sacred space. So whether that's a group, that's what I mostly recommend. That's how I created and birthed my entire business, is creating my own group and slowly growing mine while also being a part of other groups. But I think it's number one to have a community where all of these people, all of your people can gather, right, and share their experiences and ask questions and cry and laugh and just really be a part of each other's story. Because Because I think that's really where it's all about. Yes, Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn is a platform, but it's a noisy platform. And I think truly the way to make your mark is to be yourself. And what is more yourself than your story, right? That is unique to you and only you, right? And so that is the best way, I think, to truly make your mark and to not be afraid to unravel that slowly, right? I think so many people get out there and they want to just, right, lay it all out on the table, or maybe they're just even scared, like I said, to get vulnerable and to really share stories they're deep and dark and very personal. And so I always advise people who are setting up a platform, to number one, have one platform that you start with, not to overwhelm yourself, right? You don't have to be all over the place when you're starting. Just simplify and start with one direction and master that, right? And then once you've mastered that, then you can sort of expand in different mediums. But to release your story in layers, because I think that's something that I had a lot of challenges with starting out, is like, wow, there's so many components and layers to my story. There's the corporate escapee part, and then there's the part, weight loss, where I was 80, 90 pounds overweight. So there's a wellness journey. And then there's the emotional aspects of being, having extreme anxiety and depression. And it's like, well, what do I focus on? Right? Or what is even my specialty, right? I remember going to a lot of retreats and business conferences for entrepreneurs and really stressing out, where it's like, what is your, elevator pitch, and who do you help and why do you help, and all of these things that they teach you in entrepreneurial school when you're starting out. And I remember sitting next to these two girls next to me, and I said, well, I'm spiritual, but I'm also at the time, a wellness coach. And like, well, that doesn't go together. And I'm like, well, why not? Why? They're each components of me. And so I think it's beautiful how my business has evolved, right? Because like I said before, it is all connected to be that, right? Yes, it might be completely focused on business right now, but that's not to say that your business is an extension of you and your life. So of course, wellness comes into play. Of course, spirituality comes into play, right? It's all pieces of you. And when you immerse, again, connecting those dots to understand, right, how they all fit in, I think that gives you a really good picture, right, of who you are, how to tell your story. And like I said before, how to unravel that in layers to slowly warm up your audience, to connect with different people based on the different pieces of your story, right? Because none of the knowledge, that we share is new. I always say it's just the way we present it to the world, right? The way we share our experience, the way we connect, even with the quirky little stories, right? That's how we connect with people. We don't connect on the, these are my 3 bullet points to, being a successful entrepreneur. That's all well and valuable, but I think it's the stories that really give it breath. And like you said, coming alive, that give it life. So I think that's very important.
And a team, do you have a team that supports you or experts that support you?
No, right now it's just me and my husband. My husband is more on the tech side. So he's, recording and tech and kind of audio editing and such, iMovie. And then I'm sort of the mastermind behind everything else. But I think definitely this year I'm focused on writing my book. And beyond that, we'll be focused on getting a team into play, because I've definitely outgrown this space doing this all by myself.
Great. And any other key challenges that you see coming in the next 12 months for you and your business?
Not really. I think it's hard to foresee challenges. Of course, there's always the ongoing challenge, right, of, consistent income and, creation and all of that. But what I've really learned along this path is to just trust that, the foundation, what to do to continue to move, right, your business forward. And as long as you continue to do that, right, you have your offer, you have your freebie, you have a way to present that, you have a platform, and then you have a medium to share that, right, in both a evergreen and in a live setting. I think that the rest just it all falls into place, and that's really the best advice that I can give for people, especially in entrepreneurial space. And it's funny, I was speaking with a fellow entrepreneur who she said, well, I'm kind of half today. And she said, I'm half entrepreneur because I'm still on my corporate path and I do this part-time. And I said, I wouldn't say you're half an entrepreneur. You are an entrepreneur. Whether or not you do this 100% of the time is irrelevant, And I said, what is your biggest challenge and kind of reservation and going full steam? And she said, the money piece, right? The inconsistent income. But I think if you set yourself up to have, like I said, a hybrid of evergreen offers, which is offers that work without you always being in it, and then the offers that require your time, money, attention, etc. And you balance the two. That is a recipe for success.
Yeah, excellent. And what's the evergreen that's worked best for you so far?
So I have a course, a self-study course, which I started, and this is what I do with all of my offerings. So as I build a course, I first run it in a live setting, so like a live group coaching course, which is of course priced a little bit higher, and that's sort of like a test. That's my beta testing to see if that resonates, if it's successful, getting of course testimonials and feedback from the participants. I ran that twice live before it went evergreen. So now it's my evergreen offering, and it's called Live Your Vibrant Life, and it's an 8-week journey really based on, as you mentioned before, it's funny you mentioned the word alive. That's the name of my Facebook group, which stands for Alignment of Love, Inspiration, Vitality, and Energy. And it's all based on my personal journey and how I revived myself, right, from who I was in my corporate path, not knowing who I was, sitting behind Excel spreadsheets every day, really helping others fulfill their dreams while kind of sitting, in behind the wings in the background, kind of wishing and hoping that I could be more of a presence. Actually, if you had asked me if I would speak on live events 4 years ago, I would say, are you kidding me? I mean, if you watch the first videos that I produced, it was very different than who I am today, very nervous, very, hello, my name is Jessica. I don't know what I'm supposed to be saying, but right, it's that kind of a thing.
Yes.
And I've evolved into today. And it's because of this process. It's because of, right, just like I said before, putting one foot in front of the other, taking that step, not being afraid to let your motivation and that drive and that passion of whatever it is, whatever your calling is in the world, whatever you're supposed to be here for, right? As they say, the day you were born is the day the universe decided it needed you. And everybody is here, I do believe, for a specific purpose. We all have a mission in our time here on this earth.
Brilliant. Well, before we go into the next section, I'd like to mention our YouTube channel called Build, Live, Give. You get great tips to help corporate escapees, just like Jessica, to rapidly grow their business. So please subscribe. And if you love the content, please share it with other corporate escapees, just like Jessica. So Jessica, the next section's the Live section. So tell us about a few of the daily habits that help you be successful.
So mornings are very key. So I always start, but I'm not an early morning person. I should mention that caveat, because a lot of times when you hear, online, everybody, the miracle morning, which I do love, Hal Elrod, or, a lot of entrepreneurs are like, oh, it's all about the morning, get up early and you work out and you have this ritual. I don't do any of that. I tried and it really didn't work for me. And as I always, preach to other people, do you? So I do make sure I get my beauty rest, sometimes as much as 10 hours, because to be able to do the work with the energy levels that I have, requires a lot of restoration. So I make sure I get ample rest. I get up and I typically have a hot cup of lemon water or a cup of tea, and do what I call a little tea ceremony. So just kind of spending a few moments with myself in complete silence, looking out the window and just seeing, nature and hearing the birds and just kind of immersing myself, slowly rising into the day, sometimes watching the tea leaves steep, just really being mindful and letting myself, immerse in the day before the day is immersed in me, sort of thing. And then I typically spend, about 10 to 15 minutes in deep meditation. So either a guided recording or listening to nature sounds. And I'm an avid reader. As I told you, I'm writing a book, and so I'm an author as well. So of course, authors love books. And that is something that, is very valuable to me. And I don't do Kindle. It has to be a hard copy of a book that I can touch and feel and be a part of. So I do spend, probably another 20 to 30 minutes reading, of course, depending on the day. And then I sort of dive in, and, the rest of the day is, of course, serving clients, answering, emails, messages, interviews and such, working on creation, whatever my, current focus is for the year, continuing education courses. And then, of course, throughout the day, making sure that movement is a daily part of it, because as I mentioned before, energy is everything. And so what happens to energy when it's stagnant, if you think about nature, like water, standing water tends to decay. So making sure that, I consistently move my body. Am I always good about that? Probably not. That is sort of a intention for 2019 is to get out and walk more. So if I do need sort of that little reboot throughout the day, as we all kind of have our slumps, my number one go-to is to be out in nature. So just to go out. I live here in beautiful California, why I'm blessed that, it's pretty temperate, even in the winter. But I must add, I did live in Chicago for 6 years, and I would be outside even in the freezing cold. That's how much I love being outdoors.
Well,
So I would run in 15-degree weather. So to me, just having that connection with the deepest source, the purest source there is, Mother Nature, either just in complete silence, maybe listening to a podcast, or just listening to music, just some way to connect really back to myself and kind of silence out the noise that can take over you as the day goes on.
And Ryan, your husband, he's listening to the podcast right now, which is great. Hi, Ryan. So what are you going to say to him about the support he's given you through this journey?
I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know that this journey hasn't been easy, and from the get-go, something that I really must praise my husband for is, the ups, the downs. I mean, he's my rock. He's very level-headed. I tend to be a lot more emotional, right? I'm very passionate. And sort of, he likes to say aggressive sometimes. Maybe that's my corporate finance background, that kind of alpha male energy coming out in me. But he's just always been even keel. He's just very peaceful. He's very supportive. Even if I'm afraid of making a certain investment in my business, he always trusts that I know that inner voice that is always guiding me to the way that we need to go as a couple and eventually as a family. And so I really do want to thank him for his abundant love, of course, and support of this venture. And something that I should add, he said to me when I first started, and he continues to say to me when I doubted myself, he's like, if anyone can do this, it's you. I mean, he said, and I wouldn't say that lightly. He's a very honest and candid person. He said, you were made for this. And that always speaks to me when I have those moments, as we all do, where it's like, I just want to go back to something more stable and get that, steady 2-week paycheck that was so wonderful in the corporate world, especially in corporate finance. But I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't take that risk, and if I didn't continue really to take the risks that I do every single day. Every day is a risk. And I've only continued to grow and evolve in my business. And as I said before, grow and evolve as a being in the world. And I'm very blessed for that. And I thank you, Ryan, for that.
Well, the next section is the give section. And what's a cause or a community that you support and why?
I support many communities. Actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that. So I take a portion of the proceeds I have a PayPal business account. And every week, typically on a Friday, I think it's a beautiful way to close out the week, to make a donation to a charity of my choice. So I have a number of charities. I have the American Heart Association, which is very intimate to me and sort of my family. My father almost passed away years ago of a heart attack, and he's still with us here today. So I am forever indebted to the research that they do for the American Heart Association. Also, St. Jude is another charity that I'm very passionate about, St. Jude Children's Hospital, the Children's Hospital in Chicago, and also Habitat for Humanity, which I used to volunteer with in Chicago. So it just kind of depends on the week and a number of charities, but I feel it's a blessing. And I always say money is energy, to be able to give back, right? That which, has been blessed and imbued within me, to be able to give back to the world. And I always say that is the reason why I want to be successful in my business is to give back in multiple ways, right? To be able to give back to those who are less fortunate than us. And then to be able to give and share all the wisdom that I've learned along this path in hopes of inspiring others to know that there is a different way of life than the one they're living.
Well, the last section is the action section. So I'll just ask you some questions, get some rapid fire responses. So first one is, what's your top 3 productivity tips?
Top 3 productivity tips. So number 1 is having it sounds very simple, but I need simple because I have a very complicated brain. So like I said before, the whole question of what do I work on today? At the very beginning of the morning, after you have your morning rituals I described earlier, is just to write down one thing that is at the end of the day when you go to sleep, you will feel accomplished if you've accomplished this one thing. Yes, that list can continue to evolve, right? And you can create different buckets for that. This needs to be done today. This needs to be done tomorrow. But I think just the spirit of oneness, focusing on one thing. And that's what I do in my business. So number 2 productivity tip is having one focus a day, but also one a year. As an entrepreneur, I have a goal of having one new offering that I birth per year. While the others, of course, continue to evolve and I continue to share, I focus on one because when I give 100% to something, right, all of the energy is invested in that versus investing, and I'm telling you from experience, giving 10% to everything, right, you produce what? 10% of what you put into it. So that's tip number 2. And I would say productivity tip number 3 is to do the soul work. I know that sounds very counterintuitive, but if you don't do the soul work, actually all of the downloads and all of the ideas, right, as being a creator, as being an innovator, were received when I was away from my computer. So I think to be more productive, a lot of times is to step away, to go out in nature, to take a bath, to spend time with family and friends. And you'd be surprised, those whispers, those ideas that you get in those moments where you step away, those become your most innovative and your most precious ideas.
Great. And what are some favorite apps or software that help you run your business?
So speaking of time management, productivity, Toggle is a wonderful app, Toggl. And it's basically a timer for tasks. And although I'm sort of a little out of the box and I'm not very strategic in that sense, like, of course, I have a Google Calendar and I keep everything organized, but too much of that structure, like I said before, robs my freedom. So I like to have the freedom within the structure. But Toggle is really enlightening because what it helps you do, and I did this as I was creating the last course that I created. So I would set the timer for a specific module that I was creating, right? And each time I touch creating that module, I run the timer just to get a sense of, in your mind, you always have an idea, this is going to take 4 hours, but it really only takes you 2. Or on the flip side, right? This is only going to take me an hour and it takes you 4. So it's just to get a real-time sense of the reality of, what your brain says versus what is real in time. And so I think that's a wonderful app that helps me. Of course, Google Calendar, I know it's very basic, but that is the way I organize a lot of my life, my Google Calendar. Of course, I'm also a fan of pen and paper calendars I mentioned before. There's actually an interesting study that was released. It said you're 50% more likely to achieve something just by writing it down. And I think that has a lot of value to it. So just having a simple pen and paper is very effective too. And then, of course, all the social media apps, like Facebook and Instagram, just having that, all on your phone. As well as, Google, like Google Sheets and all of that, having that embedded in there. Like I have, client information. Some other programs I use are ActiveCampaign. That's sort of my CRM and email platform. So I have an app for that on my phone as well. And a program called Member Vault. There isn't necessarily an app for that, but that is really a powerhouse platform that maybe a lot of people don't know about, that I really love to share because it's very unique in the sense that instead of just sharing, let's say, a landing page, which is where I started with Lead Pages, which is a wonderful platform, but this enables you to invite somebody to an offering while also seeing everything else that you offer, sort of that Apple Store experience, kind of like a one-stop, play around, pay to play kind of thing. So that's really cool.
Brilliant. Well, we'll have the links to all of those and everything else you've mentioned in the show notes. As far as podcasts, I know you mentioned books before, but any podcast that you love to listen to? I know you said you mentioned you listened to some podcasts that inspired you to leave. What are some of the ones that you're currently listening to?
My all-time favorite podcast is The Model Health Show by Sean Stevenson. And it's funny that you asked me that because just the other day, and I read all his emails. He's just one of those people that he's such a genius in what he does. And he's a scientist. He's very scientific, and he gives you all of the really technical scientific backing, which I love and respect, being the nerd that I am. But he has a way of explaining that in a very simple way, right, to people that maybe don't understand the complications of the science behind it. And I think it's really, really awesome. So he is really amazing. I'm actually currently doing his fat loss program just because I'm always interested in the recent, innovations and everything. He's always a pioneer for all these studies that come out, and like years later it will come out in all the other wellness mediums. So I really love following him. And another podcast I'm really, really loving right now is Wabi Sabi by Candice Kumai. And Wabi Sabi is the art of, imperfection, like perfect imperfection. And what I really love so much about her podcast is it's not scripted. It's very off the cuff. Even her and her guests, it's just like whatever runs through her mind in the moment, it is exactly what you'll hear. And I think nothing can be more real than that. And it's something I really appreciate. And I think that really kind of embraces the art of perfect imperfection, because that's what stops a lot of people, I think, from putting themselves out there and starting a business or taking a risk. It's like, well, what if it's not, all perfect and manicured and scripted and, just like all of the, the Deepak Chopras and, Tony Robbins of the world. And I think sometimes being real is okay. You can eventually get to that level, but when you're starting out, it doesn't always have to be perfect. So those are probably my top two right now that I've been listening to a lot.
Brilliant. And what, you've given so much fantastic advice through this podcast, but what's some parting advice you'd love to leave for a corporate escapee?
Your connection is your currency. And so what I mean by that is that the greatest resource that you can have is the real connection, right? So sharing your story, being out there live. If you're not comfortable being out there live, well, just start journaling, start sharing, start blogging. The connection is your currency. And I say that because I had a client who for so long was like, I haven't made $1 yet. I'm just like, I feel the levee about to break, but I haven't gotten there. And I said, you just got to keep doing what you're doing, keep connecting, right? And it's just like anything in life, the more you work at it, the more you will master that craft. If you're not comfortable, as I said before, I wasn't comfortable getting on video, but I kept connecting and I kept connecting and I kept pressing play, right? That is the key. That is your connection, is your currency. And I think it's beautiful how even on Facebook and a lot of social media, we've reverted away from sort of automation and more to that real connection, real connection with real people, right? Live events, Facebook Live, webinars, master classes where people can actually ask questions, where they can touch, feel you, experience you at your core. And I always say your connection is your currency. So just get out there, be real, and make it happen.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Jessica. It's been a fantastic experience. I've actually completely filled my sheet here with taking notes, and I'll have all of those links and comments in the show notes. But Jessica's kindly given us a fantastic download. So if you go to bit.ly, so bit.ly/my reason for being, we'll also have it in the show notes. And Jessica, what will they get when they get that fantastic download?
It's an exercise called Finding Your Ikigai for passion and purpose. Ikigai is a Japanese concept, meaning your reason for being. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What fuels your fire? Because it's one thing to get started, right? And it's the time of the year, January, called the January effect. Everybody's excited about achieving all of these goals and being the best person that they can be. But what about in March? What about in May? What about when life throws something at you that is unexpected? What's going to keep you going? That's your ikigai. That's your reason for being. And I think when you stay connected to that through this journey, through entrepreneurship, through relationship, through anything challenging, that is what will take you the distance. And so it's a beautiful exercise, very introspective questions to really get to learn more of who you are and what is your mission? What is your purpose here on earth?
Oh, brilliant. Great. Thanks a lot, Jessica, and wonderful having you on the show.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's been a complete honor. And thank you, listeners, for hanging out with us today.
That was a fantastic interview with Jessica. And for me, there was 3 key takeouts. So one is that you've got 2 options in life. One is to stay with the known, or the other is to take a chance on the unknown. And I know that that's what Jessica did and has worked out very well for her. The second is how to share your vulnerable story. So Jessica does that very well on this podcast, but she also gives you some great tips on how to do it. And then the last one was the power of a supportive community. So for Jessica, as a Facebook group, I know for us, it's our community for corporate escapees, but I think it's really important to be supported in a community. So I'd love to hear what you thought about this podcast. Please email me at paul@buildlivegive.com. And also, if you think other corporate escapees would love to hear and get value from this, please share it with them. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Corporate Escapees Podcast. brought to you by Build, Live, Give.
If you would like to join a community of like-minded peers, please visit www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening and be brave.